meditation has carried her away into a forgetfulness of her lovely person, which no one but herself can forget. All her exquisite features are animated with religion in such a manner as to make any licentious thought in the beholder impious and shocking. Those eyes, which cannot be showed in public without interrupting the business of the world, fixing thousands in attention and suspending the pursuits of avarice and ambition, are devoutly raised and importunately fastened on an invisible object, offering holy violence for those good things, the thoughts of which in vulgar minds keep company for the most part with nothing but wrinkles, gray hairs, and infirmity. What a radiant glimpse of heaven is this! This quotation comes from the dedicatory letter to one of the most famous dramatic expressions of Protestant British propaganda, and that's Edward Young's 1714 dramatization of the martyrdom of Lady Jane Grey. But it's comparable in its sexual associations and its associations with the convent in its blurring of spirituality and eroticism, arising from a comparable notion of male penetration of the female private space. This, incidentally, is Mary of Agreda. She is another controversial figure, very saintly and also of challenging authority. And this is what I'm after here. Oddly enough, of course, this is the frontispiece to Halifax's Advice to a Daughter, as I referred to earlier, which had 7 editions in 12 years, immensely popular. But notice the grate behind which she is studying. And this is, again, entering into the privacy as she's reading, and here meditating on her duty as a wife, but the contemplative notion is certainly there as well. Feminist representations of the cloistered community ironically rewrite this genre, where convents were usually represented as oppressive and unnatural and depriving women of freedom. Feminist writings and proto-feminists suggest that the alternative of a lifetime of economic and sexual slavery was worse. Still says, if all men are born free, how is it all women are born slaves? These writings recognize that the popular representation of the convent of Seraglio and its unnatural restrictions on the body themselves reflect the masculinist assumption that females exist for male sexual pleasure and domestic utility. As Estelle says, the low concerns of an animal life. In much 17th and early 18th century English convent literature, there's a contrasting stream where convents are linked not with repressed sexuality, but rather with principles of romantic marriage, individual autonomy, a shelter from the despotic sources of familial patriarchy and prudential marriages. They're associated also with concepts that come out of the Tory culture of authenticity, to quote Kalkbrenner and Zook, concepts of feminine integrity tied up with the identification of the vow with the self. And so this is all linked to cavalier retirement, which naturally is empathetic to Catholic cultural overtones. Finally, they also partake in what Mary Louise Pratt calls feminitopia, the idealized world of female autonomy, empowerment, and pleasure, which can certainly be applied to Montague's descriptions of the harem culture, but here to the convent, where it becomes an independent community of women devoted to arts, education, and spiritual growth, and to a deep love and friendship amongst themselves, a feminine community independent of male social domination. And the longer version of this, I have an exploration of the actual presence of the Protestant monastery theme in mainstream literature at this time, which was actually quite well recognized. So that counter to the convent, any convent theme, there's this whole strong theme. But I'll jump ahead here to my place. And to, of course, the famous frontispiece picture of Cavendish as in classical mode it's the frontispiece to most of her published works. Proto-feminist elements then appear in representations of the convent, both in Cavendish's play, The Religious, 1662, and to some extent in the better-known Convent of Pleasure, 1668, as well as through the teasing irony of Dryden's The Assignation, or Love in a Nunnery, 1673, through to, and I'll just touch on these, the radical ambiguities of Ben's convent novellas, and she has several. The Nun, or Perjured Beauty, Fair Jilt, The History of a Nun, or The Fair Vow-Breaker. Now, all of these works center on a contrast between an oppressive patriarchal authority associated with a secular economic world and a beneficent female authority in harmony with or originating from the convent. Now, they all invoke the standard, that they're none of them are Catholic writers, they all, Dryden is not converted yet. They all invoke the standard Protestant critique of Catholic asceticism. Nonetheless, they represent the religious community as linked with autonomy and romantic marriage, as opposed to the secular community. In this way, they manipulate conventional audience expectations and open up more complex questions. Cavendish, the Convent of Pleasure, nice name. And of course, that title itself would play on audience expectations. Sure. They'd be expecting a lot of hot sex, and what did they get? But probably quite a little first. It anticipates the secular feminitopia of Scott's Millennium Hall, 120 years later, portraying a self-sustaining feminine community devoted to nature, the life of the mind, and artistic achievement, and female friendship. The women here are free of the dangers of heterosexual relations, domestic responsibility. As Irma Kelly points out, and Isabel Grundy, often English women became nuns when they could because they wanted to escape the physical dangers as well as the social dangers of male control. Childbirth was immensely risky at this time. Cavendish, not to mention the sexually transmitted diseases because of the double standard, Cavendish carefully dissociates the secular convent from the cloister, linking that with both unnatural penitence and suppressed sexuality, presenting hers as a more genuine refuge for women. Lady Happy's self-sufficient female community has no grace for intercourse with the world, that is the masculine sex, and it's ruled by beneficent female authorities. Lady Happy herself, who is chief confessor, and Nature, who is kind mistress. And it is contrasted to the convent ruled by the gods of false religious zeal that are cruel masters. But what this convent does is to purify heterosexual relations, setting up the basis for successful companion marriage, by which the only worthy man in the place, I used to hear it, you can imagine him played by whoever you want. I don't know what my students would say today. Probably the guy who played Sherlock Holmes, okay. The only worthy man in the play, in the BBC series, is tested by his taking on a feminine role, actually cross-dressed, by which he is shown to be empathetic and capable then of an emotional and intellectual relationship. Today he'd be, texting and they'd have an internet relationship. Misogynistic commonplaces that see communities of females as an absurdity unless they exist for men. If there be so many women, there will be but the more use for men, are usually voiced by the fops, who are, of course, the comic foil to the hero. The religious develops the theme much more interesting than this. This is a less well-known play, published in 1662. And the plot is built on a contrast between oppressive male authority and a beneficent female authority, between a masculine rule of law, if you like, and truth to self, feminine conscience and love. Basically, it's about two cousins who are in love with each other, they want to marry, they're very young, and the mother of the woman, Lady Perfect, approves of the marriage. The father of the young man, who is the uncle, is away and does not approve it. The young people get married, and they're very young, they're like 12 and 14, Romeo and Juliet, I think that. Anyway, that marriage is annulled by the father when he comes back, and he forces his son to marry another woman. A young girl goes into a convent, and it goes from there. The rest will be explained in my talk. Anyway, and it built on contrasting definitions of marriage echoed in Protestant Catholic theology. Lady Perfect's mother is associated with beneficent feminine authority that promotes the romantic marriage and respects her daughter's desire to encloister herself when she's separated from her husband. Male authority is embodied by Lord Donato, who is a distant father, representing prudential socioeconomic succession. And another aspect of male authority appears in the prince, who is in love with Lady Perfect and wants to force her to marry him, and he represents aristocratic privilege, succession, and arbitrary desire. The monks of the monastery, on the other hand, represent an alternate order, supportive of the romantic match, and they actually go so far as to create a new romantic order of chastity in marriage. So happy romantic marriages are the feature of this religious order. Extreme examples of masculine authority in the play appear in Lord Donato's arbitrary disposal of his son in marriage to another woman for strictly prudential reasons, and he edges this throughout with his misogynist attacks on the imperfect.